start with MTN. Africa's biggest single mobile phone company has been put on review for downgrade by the credit ratings agency Moody's. Now, this comes after the South African mobile phone operator said it was on the hook for about $10.1 billion from its biggest market, Nigeria. The Nigerian Attorney General says it's seeking about $2 billion in taxes incurred over the last decade and another $8.1 billion that Nigeria claims was illegally moved out of the country by MTN. Now, the MTN group has rejected these accusations. Authorities are hoping to resolve this matter to avoid a systemic crisis, given that repayment is about half of MTN's entire market cap and it could threaten Nigeria's banks. CGTN's Kelechi Makalam now takes a look at MTN's unending troubles in Nigeria.
The latest demand was made on Tuesday. MTN is disputing both the tax claims and unauthorized profits repatriations. The government says MTN owes it $2 billion in taxes accrued from importation of equipment and payments to suppliers over the last 10 years. MTN has produced a breakdown of payable taxes and said it was only liable to $700 million it already paid, but that seems not to help matters. It's not the first time MTN is running into trouble with regulators in Nigeria. In 2015, it was fined $5.2 billion for failure to register SIM cards. Nigeria's telecommunications regulator says failure to register SIM cards impeded the country's security forces' ability to fight crimes and terrorism. The fine was cut to $3.9 billion after a protracted negotiation. The penalties, including the latest demand, is raising concerns about Nigeria as an investment destination.
When the first one happened, now the second one has happened, the third one has happened now. We haven't really seen response from the rest of the market. In fact, it has not affected, other than affecting MTN's own shares, trading on the stock exchange in Johannesburg. No, we have not seen a movement of capital out of the Nigerian market. We have not seen that. So what that means is that probably the rest of the market is confident that this is between Nigeria and MTN, and that it's not a system-wide problem.
Nigeria is MTN's most important market, yet most troublesome. The $2 billion tax demand has driven its shares down by 17%. That is MTN's worst performance in the South African stock markets in 12 years. Despite the turbulent relationship with Nigerian markets, MTN's CEO, Rob Shutter, insists the telecoms company remains committed to Nigeria.
MTN is operational in 22 countries, 22 markets, Nigeria being one of them. Yet their business base in Nigeria, their subscriber base, for example, in Nigeria is 25% of their total subscriber base. So that's a quarter of it. About between 50 to 60% of their annual profit comes from their Nigerian market. So it's a very difficult decision to make. MTN needs Nigeria.
Aside the demand to pay accumulated taxes and return irregularly repatriated dividends, MTN has struggled for the past 6 years to remain the leader in Nigerian telecoms market. Its market share has shrunk from 49% in 2013 to 42% recently. It's likely MTN will seek some form of arbitration to negotiate the taxes downwards, but exiting is clearly not an option for the South African operator. Kelechi Makalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Right, then quite a bit to get through in this story, so let's bring in correspondents from both ends of the continent. Deji Badmus is live in Lagos. Angela Kopole joins us as well from Johannesburg. Gentlemen, welcome. Deji, let's start with you. So walk us through the background to this $2 billion claim in back taxes from the Office of the Attorney General. What evidence do they have for tax evasion?
Well, first of all, Rama, what I have to tell you is that no side at all is providing details of this whole issue. What the Attorney General's office has basically said is that it carried out a comprehensive investigation and discovered that for a period of 10 years, MTN did not remit the proper tax it should remit, and that MTN is liable to around $2 billion now in tax payment. But MTN, of course, carried out its own, well, because when the Attorney General's office now carried out its investigation, it sent the outcome now to MTN and asked MTN to do its own documentation, look at its documents and all of that. MTN then wrote back that it had looked at its own documentation and that it actually paid the proper tax, and that altogether, within that period, it paid $700 million. But then the Office of the Attorney General is not accepting the explanation of MTN. It says MTN is indebted to the tax authority now to the tune of $2 billion. No side, I must confess, Rama, no side, not even MTN, is providing details of, details now on this issue. What we do know is that we're talking about taxes now on importation of equipment, importation payments of for shareholders that are abroad, and all of that.
Right. Angelo, so MTN, I checked this on the terminal a little earlier, 5 hold ratings, 3 sell ratings at the moment. How would a downgrade from Moody's deeper into junk territory, how would that change the stock's fortunes at the JSE?
Well, look, the share price was at 86.90 before the news broke. It dropped down to around 70.80, and it's been trading sideways since then. Yesterday, management who were scattered around the world, in fact, including being in Nigeria, the US, and at the corporate head office in Johannesburg, got together and on a conference call with some of the bigger institutional investors around the world, they were putting out fires and trying to limit the damage that was caused. Moody's did say that there's a range of outcomes possible here, but the group has enough liquidity, they put it, to repay approaching debt maturities over the next 12 to 18 months. So the next sizable refinancing wall is only in 2021. So for now, MTN has to wait and see what the response is from those 2 arms of the Nigerian government to the letters in response to those demands that were made. Raman?
Indeed. Deji, let me come back to you. A probe by Nigerian legislators, and I remember this because we talked about it on the program. That probe had concluded there was no wrongdoing by MTN in moving capital out of the country. So what new data did the CBN come across to trigger this demand for $8.1 billion? That's not a small amount of money. Why are they demanding that it should be returned now?
Yeah. You're absolutely right. It's a lot of money. But let's get something straight, Rama. It is true that when the Senate carried out its investigation, it clearly cleared the MTN now of any wrongdoing. But that is not to say there was no infraction. I mean, the Senate actually discovered there was infraction, but the CBN, the Central Bank of Nigeria, took the blame because the CBN then was blamed for allowing the infraction to take place. And of course, the CBN provided some kind of explanation that it did allow that to happen just because of the laws being operated at that time. And that investigation actually related to the issuance of certificate of capital importation. But this is slightly different, and that's what the CBN governor has been explaining. The crux of the matter in this case has to do with the conversion of shareholders' loan to preference shares, which MTN had to repatriate money out of the country on that basis. I mean, what the CBN is basically saying is that it did not give MTN final approval for the conversion of this shareholders' loans now to preference shares. It gave just an approval in principle and then gave certain conditions that must be met before MTN would be allowed to, do the final conversion. So MTN did not come back for that final approval. The banks did not get the final approval. They went on to issue certificate of capital importation on the basis of that temporary approval. And so, and it's beginning to come out clear. The CBN governor made it clear that it took 30 months of investigation to unravel this, and that MTN and the banks were giving ample time, over 12 weeks, to respond and come up with evidence that they were not guilty of this, that they had evidence backing their claim that they didn't do anything wrong at all, but they were not able to come up with the evidence. And so that is the reason why the central bank has decided to ask MTN to return all the monies it repatriated over that period, which of course amounts to $8.1 billion, Rama.
Indeed. Of course, for context for our viewers, $8.1 billion is roughly what you'd need to build a rail line, the standard gauge rail line from the port of Mombasa in Kenya all the way to the border, pretty much all the way to the Ugandan border in the west. Angelo, the last time they faced a crisis of this magnitude, MTN drafted in a wide team of negotiators, including the former U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder. Will MTN litigate first or negotiate first in Nigeria?
Raman, it's not clear who's been working behind the scenes this time round. No heads have rolled as far as we know at the moment. There are no heavy hitters or big names involved that we can see. Schutter has used his team on the ground and taken substantial legal advice. They prepared responses to those demands and sent them through to the authorities. That was on yesterday, in fact. They plan to talk to the Nigerian authorities and convince them that MTN did everything by the book. So they will definitely negotiate first, which I'm told points to MTN management remaining committed to the Nigerian business, Raman.
Indeed. Okay, we'll leave it there for the time being. That, of course, was Angelo Copeland. They're live in Johannesburg. And, of course, Dejipan was live in Lagos, Nigeria.